It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
These are the final seconds.
The lead in the fourth. Can they hold on to it?
That do or die time. And everything rides on one shot. But it isn't going to be that easy.
And it's a one-point game.
This is down to the wire.
They're going to try the three-point attempt.
One shot to take you to the top. One winner. This is clutch basketball. That's the NBA playoffs. That's game.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. You're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Listening to who? Always a wonderful host of this podcast, Miller Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millerthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. For today's show, it's a jam-packed show as always. It's part 2 of my crossover with Javi Reyes, host of Locked On Padres. I think it's still pretty relevant because we talk about things like Ha-Seong Kim. We talk about the Will Myers resurgence. Is it real? I guess it is based off yesterday's game. We get some D-backs talk in there. Well, I even sneak in, of course, that I love to do. I sneak in a little Mike Trout versus Mookie Betts debate. So there's a whole bunch we talk about in today's pod. But first, I want to talk to you guys about Locker Room, because this episode is brought to you by Locker Room. Download the app and join me this week. Well, not this week. Join me next week, actually, when I'll be going live. Don't know what day yet, but I want to go live during one of the games to do a little post-game reaction. So you got to get in on the action. Go to Locker Room in the iOS store. Download the app because it's changing the way we talk sports. Now, let's get into that conversation with Locked On Padres host Javi Reyes and I. One guy who did, get a major contract extension that you mentioned is Fernando Tatis. He's locked up 14 years, $340 million. How does it feel to know the face of your franchise is here to stay? You don't have to worry about the Mookie Betts or Francisco Lindor thing.
It's awesome. And I'm stealing a point that I saw on Twitter from somebody. I forgot who it was. I'm sorry for stealing your point, I guess, if you're listening to this. But someone brought up that they were like, what Carlos Correa is going through right now with that offer, and very publicly being like, yeah, I'm testing free agency waters, like, because they kind of lowballed them. That's, I think, what a lot of Padres fans were afraid of. What if we get to this situation where they try and save money and they do this whole thing? Instead, they were like, man, we love you, man. Be a star here. Be the star of San Diego. Here's your 14-year deal. And some people said, they were like, well, that was a tremendous, what's the word? Discount, and that's true to an extent, but you're also making a huge assumption that a guy who hasn't played a full season's worth of games continues this and, more importantly, stays healthy. Tatis, he looked at that money. He said, I don't have to worry about it. And he said, I am good. This money is great. And I'm here for the next 14 years. I'm happy here. And he sees that the team clearly wants to contend. He's not going to be in, say, a Mike Trout situation, at least hopefully right now, where you're like, oh my God, I signed to this place and there's nothing to, I said your favorite player's name.
Yeah. Don't get me started. That's a trigger word over here.
That's the trigger word for Miller. Miller's the only baseball fan I know where Mike Trout has become his brand in almost a bad way. It's the trigger word. But, yeah, I think it's a lot of fun, but it's definitely them avoiding that situation that the Astros might find themselves in is awesome. I like that they don't have to worry. They don't have to worry that there's going to be something, something really bad that happens, that they're going to, they're trying to underpay him or whatever. He decided, it works both ways. If he's awesome and he's doing Mike Trout things for years and years, and he could have got a $500 million deal in 2030, whatever. Okay, sure. But then at the same time, you don't know for sure. So he's settled for the guaranteed money. And I think that's cool. And I think that part of the reason he did that was because of the clear willingness by ownership to be on his side, not manipulating service time. You cannot tell me that did not play into his willingness to want to re-sign with the team. They said, no, you're ready. So we're bringing you up. We're not doing any of this baloney that other teams are doing. You can't tell me that didn't pay up dividends. And them trading for Snell, and like we just talked about with the offseason moves, that has to be part of it. It feels great for sure. And it is, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's so funny looking because now we've been both doing this pod for a while. Like you were really bullish on your team last year. And I have to say, I guess I'm going to pivot now into kind of my questions and my point about your team. Believe it or not, Millard, you ready for this?
Let's hear it.
I've gone back and forth. At one point, I called the NL West just a super top-heavy team, and that it was just Dodgers and Padres, and that the other teams were going to be bottom. I think that's only true with the Rockies and poor Ryan Latico, who is, it's going to get dark. I think it's going to get dark. Everybody tune into that podcast. Send me a DM if you hear him like slowly losing it. I need to be able to check up on my guy just in case on episode 120 when Trevor Story's back, he's batting 340 with 25 homers, but then the rest of the team were 8 and 65. like when he starts losing it, please let me know, guys. I want to check up on my guy. But I actually think, and you mentioned this, about everything that could have gone wrong for the D-backs went wrong. So my thing is there a regression to the mean at minimum to be expected? Will Ketel Marte, like you said, the power was just gone. I think he only had like 4 home runs last year or something like that, 2 home runs last year. I'm looking at it now. And his on base was a little bit low at 323. His slugging was down. The OPS, just not a great year. I don't think he's a bad player. I was expecting a little bit of regression, but that was extreme. The only thing that seemed to go right for you guys, which in fairness you called, was Zach Gallen turning into a great starter, which unfortunately, though, he did get hurt. I know you just did the type of thing and you were like, oh no, I don't want to talk about him, but I think the D-backs could be at least certainly not a rollover, not a pushover of a team. Cause I am expecting maybe Bumgarner will be at least, and you know me, we talked about this last year. I am no fan of Madison Bumgarner. I think he's annoying. I think he, for years, because he was so talented and so good that people didn't kind of, whatever the term is, kind of call him out on his BS that he was pulling with, he even did that with Myers. When Myers flipped his bat, he's giving him the dirty. I'm like, it's not his fault that you've given up like 7 home runs to the Padres today, you jerk. And that's putting it lightly. So trust me, I'm no fan of his, but can we expect a little bit of regression to me? Can Carson Kelly bounce back? Can Eduardo Escobar bounce back? Can Christian Walker, who somehow was one of your better players last year, David Peralta, Cole Calhoun, who had like 16 homers. Is there anything to be expected that this team can maybe bounce back and be a little bit interesting? Or are they similar to the Rockies, just a team that the only story we're going to be wondering about is, are they going to try and offload some of their best players at the deadline?
I'll answer Javi's question, but first, I want to talk to you guys about BetOnline because BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Football might be over, but NBA, college basketball, and the NHL in full swing. BetOnline even covers awards, TV shows, and reality TV. Real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine. BetOnline has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's free to sign up. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Promo code LOCKEDON.
This episode is brought to you by HP Plus. In a world full of smart devices, shouldn't your printer be smart too? It is with HP Plus. These printers know when they're running low, so you always get the ink you need delivered right when you need it. Plus, you save up to 50% on ink, so you can print whatever you want, as much as you want, anytime you want. Huh, that is pretty smart. Get 6 free months of instant ink when you choose HP Plus. Conditions apply. Visit hp.com/smart for details.
Yo, the sports news you need in under 20 minutes with the Locked On Today podcast. Host Peter Bruskowski updates you on the latest news in every major sport with the help of our local experts. Follow the Locked On Today podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right. Let's get back to that conversation with Javi Reyes. No, I think they definitely can be a competitive team. Again, I think they could fight for a wild card spot. I think they're more likely to finish, around 85 wins than make the wild card. But I think they can be competitive. I think it just depends. Will we get that progression to the mean like you've been mentioning? And I'm probably confident in at least a few of the players that they could do that, like a Ketel Marte. I think a Luke Weaver can do it. We saw it in 2019 when he came over. He was a stud for the D-backs. The guy I have the least amount of confidence in is the highest paid player on the roster, which is Madison Bumgarner. His fastball velocity is just going in the opposite direction. Only averaged about 88, 89 miles per hour last season. And it wasn't much different than his off-speed pitches. So he just wasn't able to get hitters off balance. And he was giving up a good amount of home runs, like 13 home runs in like 40 innings pitched or something ridiculous. Couldn't go through 6 innings one time last season. So Madison Bumgarner is going in the wrong direction right now for the team. And he's not even a guy that's that old. He's only about 31 years old, which is still crazy. But he's been in the league for, over a decade, broke in when he was 19 years old. So he just has a ton of mileage on his arm. So that's really the biggest question, I think, is Madison Bumgarner. But I have some more confidence in the other guys. Of course, we don't know what Zach Allen's going to be. I think we know what he's going to be, but we don't know how long he's going to be out for with that injury. They don't really have a timetable right now, and it's pretty scary. It sounds like it's not like a Tommy John kind of situation, which is, the blessing. He doesn't have to go see Dr. James Andrews because that's basically the kiss of death when you have to go see that guy. And for the rest of the team, I believe in a Ketel Marte. Yeah, maybe we're going to see some regression from 2019, but that guy finished 4th in MVP voting that season. He was an absolute stud. Christian Walker, I think, is a really good player who I've been saying you got to watch out for in your fantasy draft.
Yep,
I've won tonight.
Yeah, in my very deep league, I have
there him. You go.
What about starting first baseman?
I got a draft tonight that you bailed out on me on, but it's okay.
I did not bail out, bro. There's a potential that if every league that I would have 5 fantasy leagues this year, and I'm just nervous. Although I have to admit, I was before we started this call, I was about to be like, maybe it's just the draft is so fun. You know what I mean? But then when I don't want to I don't know. It's tough. Do you still have any spots left?
No, I don't actually.
No, okay.
You filled it up. I had one ready for you, and then you bailed. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, for the D-backs, I still like the team. I still think they have a lot of talent on paper. Mm-hmm. I think we are the 3rd best team in the division. I won't count out the Giants. Last season, I thought the Giants were going to be the bottom feeders in the division, and they were feisty. And maybe most of that's because of the short sample size, but I don't want to count them out heading into the 2021 season. So I think the D-backs have a lot of talent. It just depends who can get those bounce back seasons. Escobar, I think, is still a stud baseball player. Can he just, he comes into camp more in shape this season, so hopefully that works out for the team. Carson Kelly, it's basically a make or break season for him because we got Dalton Varsho, one of the top catching prospects, waiting in the wings to take his job if Carson Kelly just does not perform. So the D-backs, I still like the team on paper, but this team is, nowhere near playoff contention by the trade deadline. Then I think we are going to see some of these dudes get offloaded a little bit. But let me throw it back now to you, Javi. And what I want to ask you is, let's see, I got a couple of questions here that I want to ask you. But one, I want to ask you one other move about the offseason because I thought it was kind of an underreported move. I don't know how big of a move it is. I'll ask you that in a second. But Ha-Seong Kim, the guy from the Korean League, he was, maybe I'm butchering his name, help me with the pronunciation, but he was an absolute
Kim, yeah.
Ha-Seong Kim, yeah. He was an absolute stud in the Korean League, just looking at his numbers, just, across the board. I don't know how that translates to baseball. So that's why I kind of want to ask you about, because I feel like that would just underreported. That would just kind of, it was during the time when the Padres were making all those moves. And then it was like, whoa, they got Kim too. And no one even talked about it. And he just seemed like an international stud. So is he going to be an everyday player for, your Padres? And what are your expectation levels for him?
So Kim is one of the more interesting things about the team. They decided to basically have a lot of depth when it comes to second base. They've got Cronenworth, who should be the front runner, and he is going to be the starter probably for most days. And then they've got Jerickson Profar, who they resigned, and then Kim. I think Kim, you're right, it did go unreported, but I think part of that is just because that was all in the same day. And understandably, the Darvish and Snell moves were just a lot bigger. And then you take into account the Tatis extension and Musgrove and then Keone Kela, Mark Melancon, that people forget a little bit that that would have been one of the headline moves for a lot of teams, I think. I think a team like Toronto, before they ended up getting someone like Marcus Semien, that would have been the main biggest move of the offseason for a lot of teams. So I understand a little bit why it got underreported, but I think it's an upside play. I think that for now, he hasn't been super impressive in the spring. He's definitely adjusting. He's adjusting to major league pitching. He's adjusting to the speed specifically. I have no issue with the off speed stuff and the, curveballs and all that type of stuff. I think that he'll be able to adapt to that. He's got power and he's got speed and he's a great defensive player. So that's another thing about him. This isn't just some slugger only guy who's just that's all they got him for. No, like they want him to be an all around type of player, and which is great. And they got him on a contract that is really team friendly too. They got him for a 4-year contract worth $28 million. So that's not too much. That's not too bad. So I think part of this is them saying he actually is a little bit of a longer term play. I think they're not necessarily expecting too much of him this season. All of my fantasy baseball fans out there who are expecting a 2020 guy, a 20 home run, 20 steal guy, which is the type of potential he has, I'd be a little bit careful on that because I don't know if he's quite ready yet. And that's okay. This is not a Padres team that needs him to be amazing immediately. Because of thankfully, because of the outbreak, the breakout of Jake Cronenworth, who hopefully can repeat. They just have a lot of assurance there, and they got a lot of upside there. But I'm excited for Kim, and I think that it just goes to show you how really it's such a diverse team too in a lot of ways. They bring in Darvish, even Joe Musgrove with a Texas edge, Texas attitude, Chris Paddock. Like I can't wait to see how these guys interact with each other, which was already a fun team last year, and I can't wait to see how they are this year. But Kim, I'd say it's the adjusting. His swing is fast, but can he kind of still adjust to the major league level of pitching? I would say at the beginning, no, but look out for him a little bit on as the season progresses, but do not, I think penciling him in as this like rookie of the year candidate is a little bit of a mistake. I think he's a guy that is a long-term play, and they're hoping that, especially if we hopefully get the DH, that maybe that might be one of the positions that they could have him be at, which I feel like you're already, that's another thing.
Another trigger word.
DH. Another trigger word is the DH.
Man, I
want a lot of trigger
bad.
words, because Millard has the takes. He's definitely, I mean, I think you're top 5 in the MLB network for being a big fan of having a take. You like issuing your takes and you stand by them. I mean, the Mike Trout one was the infamous one, and that got you into some trouble almost. I mean, it got you in a little bit of trouble, but that's it for my kind of thoughts on Ha-Seong Kim.
I'll sneak in my Mike Trout debate with Javi Reyes, but first I want to talk to you guys about Built Bar, because we've been telling you about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market for a while now. Built Bar is the amazing low calorie, low sugar, high protein, high fiber, amazing tasting protein bar with 100% chocolate on all bars. Now's the time to find out which Built Bar is the best. It is Built Bar Madness. Today's matchup, it is the coconut brownie chunk versus cookie dough chunk. This is an easy one. If you love chocolate chips and things of that nature, regular cookie, regular chocolate chip cookie, then the cookie dough chunk is made for you and me. And if you want to vote, go to BuiltBar.com or go to @bar_built on Twitter. Remember to use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. That is LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order at BuiltBar.com, and check back to see who won today's matchup and who will become the best tasting protein bar.
This episode is brought to you by ESPN Plus. Dustin Poirier and Conor the Notorious McGregor will settle the score at UFC 264 on Saturday, July 10th, exclusively on ESPN Plus. After Conor McGregor defeated Poirier in 2014, Poirier evened the score in January, setting up the most highly anticipated rubber match in UFC history. UFC 264 is exclusively available to ESPN Plus subscribers for $69.99. Or sign up now to get UFC 264 and an ESPN Plus annual plan for $89.98. Visit espnplus.com/Spotify.
If you're the type of baseball fan that can't help but get giddy over prospects, we have the podcast for you. Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by minor league play-by-play voice Arm Layton, is the only daily podcast that's voted entirely to the stars of tomorrow. Follow Locked On MLB Prospects on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. All right. Let's get back into it. Let's wrap up the pod. Yeah, and I back it up, the Mike Trout, take with the stats. I got the facts behind it.
We talked about that a lot. We talked about like the weirdness of baseball where, and I get it, but it admittedly is a little bit weird where Mookie Betts is winning all these things. He's having big moments in the playoffs, granted, for a much better team. But it's just like he's the guy almost, but he's not the best player. And I get it, but it's just it's weird how baseball works, I think, where that's kind of the case of what's happening. And I talked to you that I thought Bregman actually should have won the MVP that year, because I was like, I don't think Trout was he better? Yes, but I don't think he was significantly enough better to take away from the Astros are the bigger story that year, and more people knew about Bregman and his awesome season. And I think that deserves part of it. Is it Mike Trout's fault? No. But that's just kind of how I felt about it. And I know now we got to be careful, because I know that he's itching, guys. He's like nibbling at the mic. He's ready to go in.
I got the gears moving.
Yeah, he's ready to go in. So
just got to go one sidebar real quick on that, and it's not that I don't think Mike Trout's the best player. I think it's arguable. I think it's up for debate. And I probably lean Mookie Betts in. It's because, baseball right now is so analytics driven. It's all about the tangibles. But, Mookie Betts, I think he just has the things you don't see in the stats. I think it's the intangibles. I think he just has a certain energy that radiates not just throughout himself, but throughout his whole team. And I think he just brings a different level of, that outside energy to the rest of his squad members that Mike Trout just doesn't do. Yes, he's a fun guy. He's got good personality, but I don't think he impacts the other players like a Mookie Betts does, honestly. And when you watched him and JD Martinez together, Mookie Betts was always helping out other dudes with swings and giving him notes. And maybe Mike Trout does that something too. But with Mookie Betts, I just feels like he has such a greater impact on the dudes around him, and not just, what he's doing at the plate as opposed to Mike Trout. So that's just my quick, Mike Trout rant. We won't have to get too far into that, because I do want to ask you about another player on the Padres, because Will Myers kind of had, a resurgence of a season in 2020. Of course, it's short sample size, but 15 home runs or something? He only had 18 or something the previous year, and 155 games. So are you buying this Will Myers, resurgence?
Well, so I think it depends. So there's two ways of thinking about this, which is, number one, some people are like, is he genuinely, you just talked about intangibles. Is this one of those things where Myers, who's always been described as kind of a laid back guy, a little bit of a goofball, famously has that one picture where he's looks like super high or whatever. And then he has the moment on Twitch when someone's playing Fortnite where he makes fun of Andy Green, like a little bit of a goofball, a little bit of a laid back personality. Was he kind of this introverted guy who didn't necessarily like being the guy that had to be the star for the team, which is what he was for a while, like the biggest contract for a Padres player in history. And instead now he's like the seventh most important guy, sixth most important guy on the team. And then all of a sudden he's really producing, and he was, we talked about this not too long ago. His clutch stats were amazing. I was like, what is going on? This guy's been amazing. He was mostly just known as a guy who would beat up on the Rockies in Colorado, hit for the cycle and all that, and then San Francisco, right? But now I'm starting to have a little bit of faith that I'm watching him extend the bat across the plate to go for a single. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And then also, if I'm not mistaken, here's a little, Coors Light, cold hard stats. That he, I think, led the league in home runs off of non-fastballs last year. And that is not what he did. It was always fastballs for him. Any off-speed thing, you got him. Any curveball, any changeup, you got him. A splitter, a fork ball, whatever you want to throw. He would, struggle with those a lot. And all of a sudden, he adjusted and became a guy that could hit those off-speed pitches. So there's hope for it, but it's definitely not a lock. And I think him along with Hosmer, those are the two biggest questions. Can they repeat? Can the kind of adjustments that they made, Hosmer with the launch angle stuff, he famously, always hit the ball into the ground. It's just, God, don't get me started on Hosmer. Can he, along with Myers, replicate what they did? That will make the Padres extremely dangerous if everything that they did last year was legit. Machado, Tatis, even Grisham, all those guys I really do believe are 100% legit. But can Myers can especially Myers, can he be for once not just this streaky guy that had a nice 30-game kind of sample size? And I am optimistic that he can, but I will definitely not. If I don't believe I deserve to get old takes exposed if someone takes out my clip and be like, oh, you idiot, how did you believe in Myers? Well, it's not impossible. It's not impossible, but I am rooting for him because, wow, what a pivot it's been watching this guy just be so much more fun, so much more laid back, and looked like he was having a lot more fun last year. That walk-off against Seattle in the doubleheader, just absolutely phenomenal stuff. So I'm hopeful, but gotta be cautiously optimistic, I think is the way to put it.
And Will Myers only a year younger than Madison Bumgarner, if you could believe that.
Crazy. I know, right?
And Hosmer was actually going to be my next question, but he did kind of answer it there because his time in, his first 2 seasons with the Padres, haven't been, super spectacular or anything like that. Probably hasn't looked too good, but, his contract is kind of front loaded. And, the last 3 years of his deal is only making $13 million. So how do you feel about the Eric Hosmer deal right now? I mean, you did mention his numbers, like the launch angle were increasing, some of the advanced analytics were starting to go his way. And I had him on my fantasy team. He did have a lot of injuries last season, which kind of hurt me, but he was pretty good when he did play. And pretty much whenever he came back to that lineup, it just picked up where he left off. So is he another guy that you think you could be cautiously optimistic about heading into the 2021 season? And how do you feel about that contract?
The contract, I think from the very get-go was a little bit of, this is a lot for a guy who has never been a very good plus defender, despite the Gold Gloves, which is a great example of why Gold Gloves are a little bit of a popularity contest. And he's been a guy that's very inconsistent throughout his career. He's he's like the San Francisco Giants, where the San Francisco Giants would win every other year. Eric Hosmer would be every other year that he'd be good. And then his best season came the year before of a contract year. That was okay. And they brought him in a lot of it because of veteran leadership and stuff like that. And he'd be a great clubhouse guy. And, it is good that the back end of the contract isn't as front loaded, but we really need to hope that this year that he showed last year was him finally learning and adapting and being a guy that could at least, he's not going to be in the top 10 probably at first baseman, but at least do not be a liability to the point where I'm like, can I just get a Christian Walker? Can I just get an Eric Thames? You know what I mean? Can I just get anyone like that? Because at least they're not going to be making as much money as you are for what you do provide. So I'm optimistic on Hosmer. I've always thought that they take it a little bit easy, honestly, for reasons. I guess I'll just, without going too deep into it, on him in the media in San Diego a little bit. I think they aren't as hard on him, considering that he really hasn't performed due to being at the time the biggest contract that they gave out. And then, of course, Machado comes in. So I think they did take it a little bit easy on him, but I'm hoping that what we saw last year was legit, and there's reason to believe it. But just like with Myers, if you told me that he reverts back to what he was in 2018 or 2019, I would not be that surprised. But even still, what's great about the Padres is even if that does happen, that does not mean it's the do or die, like the end of the world season. There's still a lot of guys like Tommy Pham who's going to be coming back. And I think Pham is going to be awesome this year. I'm very optimistic that he will return to his warlock status that I proclaimed him as before the season and before he started getting hurt and all that stuff. So very excited for that.
Yeah. I was just going to say Hosmer, just another guy who's been in the league a decade, feels like he's super old, but again, just only 31 years old. So it's not like he's, coming out of his prime. He still has 3-4 more years where he could play really high level baseball, all-star caliber baseball. So I still like the Hosmer contract. And by the end of it, it's only going to be around $13 million, like I said before. So it's not like he's going to be killing you on the books. And right now the Padres are such a deep team. I mean, we'll see what their team looks like in 5 years. Yu Darvish might not be there anymore because how old is he? I don't have his age right here, but he's like Darvish 35 or something.
33, 34. Let me look that up real quick. I forgot.
Yeah, so he's a little bit older, but he still got Blake Snell, still got Musgrove, who's young. That's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And guys, the D-backs lost yesterday, but I'm feeling good today. Merrill Kelly day. Merrill Kelly versus Blake Snell on the mound tonight. I'm excited to watch today's matchup. Hope you guys are watching it too. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. And as always, stay safe and stay healthy. Deuces!